sanitizing the thing legally and making it officially. Basically, its life exists on the internet more than anything else. It's not owned by any distribution company, though there have been offers to buy it. But I'm not willing to let it go that route. I'm going to keep it in the altruistic form that it was intended to be. And Zeitgeist, the movie, is what it is today. It's been very fascinating to see the evolution of that particular film, indeed.
Well, and for those who actually haven't, who may not have seen it, they can go to zeitgeistthemovie.com. But you touch on 3 topics, and there's some sensitivity here also. But you, right away, start talking about organized religion. You lead into 9/11 and kind of the military-industrial complex that surrounds that. And then you touch on our banking system, and in all 3 aspects you're showing areas of our society where we're controlled, in most cases unknowingly. And
sure.
could you what led you to kind of take this route?
Well, first, let me just real quickly, it's zeitgeistmovie.com, not zeitgeistthemovie.com, just so no one's confused.
Thank you.
No problem.
Well, I'm confused, but now you've unconfused me.
No problem. The first movie dealt with myths. The whole film is based on mythology. It begins with the myth of religion, the most powerful myth that we've created. Then I go into the myth of the government's account of the event of 9/11. Then the third section I go into the myth of the banking system, and essentially the myth of democracy, the myth that the people have a say in their government as it exists, the myth that there's this freedom that everyone has been talking about in this country for so long, yet when you break it all down, we are pushed around like pawns by the larger order institutions. And that's really what the entire film denotes. I'm not sure what specifics you'd like me to go into, but that's the general summary.
Well, the other aspect of it, I have to admit, I will acknowledge this for the world and anyone else who's listening, that what attracted me initially to Zeitgeist was the challenge to, as you said, the myth of organized religion. That's probably the touchiest for everyone,
sure.
but it's the one that I embraced the most as a defrocked Roman Catholic, and happy to say so. And I appreciated the fact that what you do, I think, are 2 levels there. One, you show how religion is imposed upon us and embraced by some people as a way of having a right or wrong. It just creates a straight line that you must walk. But the other side is that there are so many interlacing stories or myths and within religion that there's no reason for anyone to use religion as a barrier against anyone else, because there are so many that touch on so much of the same information.
Yes, absolutely. And I make that point again in Zeitgeist Addendum when I make the statement, something to the effect that once you realize that all religions are connected, it makes the biases, as you've basically stated, utterly obsolete. You can't look at any singular religion with a particular arrogance, because if you really do your homework on it, all religions have been made up by us and then intertwined through history in an emergent fashion. Comparative religious study is one of the most fascinating things, and it's not a derogatory understanding. In other words, I'm not trying to insult people. I'm trying to let them understand that these things are not just, obviously the superstitious basis is what I'm against. If you look at religion that it's handed down by God, well, you're not going to get very far in your worldview because it's completely rigid and fixed. But if you look at religion as a culmination of life experience, the myths do have meaning. I've always been a fan of Joseph Campbell.
Yes.
And he doesn't just derail this mythology. He points out the ramifications. There's a humanity to the mythology, and you can look at it from many different angles, and it's a learning process. It's history, basically, and I think that's very important that people understand history.
And that is a very important point. And before we go any further, we're going to take a commercial break. We want to remind everyone that we're talking with Peter Joseph from Zeitgeist and Zeitgeist Addendum, and Jacques Fresco and Roxanne Meadows, stars of Zeitgeist Addendum as well as the Venus Project, and we will be right back after this.
Welcome back. You're listening to Good Vibrations, Tools for Transformation with Solazar and Kirillani on AM 540 KRXA.
And before the break, we mentioned to everyone that we're talking with Peter Joseph from Zeitgeist and Zeitgeist Addendum. Zeitgeist has been seen by over 100 million people around the world, and that doesn't include those who have seen Zeitgeist Addendum. And we also have Jacques Fresco and Roxanne Meadows with us from the Venus Project, that wonderful illustration of a resource-based economy and what that would mean to the world. And Peter, before we went to the break, we were talking about the mythology of religion, and some of which is mentioned in Zeitgeist, but you also mentioned that 9/11 was kind of an epiphany for us, and part of Zeitgeist is about 9/11.
Yes, it is.
And so what was it that in viewing the 9/11 or going through the experience of seeing that led you to want to explore that more?
Well, I believe the official story for the first 4 or 5 years, I think, like most people did. And then through time, I began to watch the government's actions in response to that event. And in my other research, knowing about wars and how wars are created, the reasoning for wars as resource grabs and power monopolies, it really began to fall into line what the government was doing in response to this event. So initially I was horrified by how this event was used for the establishment's purposes, essentially Wall Street, if you go deep enough into it. So given that, I started to kind of backtrack, and during that time there was a large amount of information coming out in books, which I had more or less ignored, books and media and video, about contrary theories to what the government claimed happened. I looked at it from a general skepticism, as I do with most things, but yet slowly I started to investigate into it. And as of now, I've probably spent about 1,000 hours on studying that particular event, and I can say without a doubt that if there was ever a conspiracy theory in association with the event of 9/11, it's the government's story more than anything else. And if anything, it should be a catalytic motivation to understand that we need to do something different in our system. I'm not one of those people that advocates an overthrow of the government or an overthrow of this or that. I've been educated enough to see beyond this. Events such as this are products of our culture, products of people that can justify the murder of thousands of people because they think it's for the better good of the country in the long run. That's how people like Dick Cheney or Zbigniew Brzezinski and many of these individuals think. It's in their writing, plain as day. So, I felt it was important to relay that information so people could wake up to one of the biggest lies, as far as I'm concerned, of the 20th century.
Well, what's interesting is that in the last 8 years, more than any other, I believe you've identified two of those pivotal elements. We've seen with the rise of the fundamentalists how the idea of, it's my God against your God, and that aspect has always been there. But if I believe in the words in this book and you don't, then I have to be right because God talks to me. And also, if I believe there's a better way to run this world, then I'm right, and no matter what I do, to reach that end is okay. And you just need to go along with me because I know better. And those first two aspects of Zeitgeist, which are organized religion and how it's used to control people, and the aspects of 9/11, which was probably, even as you portray it, and as architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth and other organizations have shown, it's probably one of the largest propaganda campaigns ever staged in the world, and yet it was used to control us. Religion controls us through a certain level of fear of our life and what the afterlife might be. And in 9/11, we were controlled for fear for our life and security on a daily basis just by the result of that. And so we are, in fact, I think the point of your movies might be, but tell me if I'm wrong, that we might in fact be the enslaved ones and we just are not aware of that.
Well, I think it could be very easily established that the majority of the population in most countries are very much controlled. In order for the people in positions of power to maintain their power, the populations have to subscribe to the value systems that those people in power portray. So it's no surprise that advertising portrays so much greed and all of these aberrancies of vanity, because at the highest echelon, these types of mentalities are what actually run things. I don't necessarily say it's an outright conspiracy, that there's people that are trying to sit there and control everything you think. When it comes to news media and censorship, yes, it's very true in that regard. But more than anything